Hey, Broken World Entertainment, and this is the review for episode 7 of Picard Season 3. This episode is called Dominion. As usual, non-spoiler, now we'll get into the spoiler. Just not too much in way of multiple kind of story arcs this time. So, basically this episode is the Titan's on the run. It's trying to find places to hide that it can't be tracked by the Shrike. Vadic has only a few hours to try and get Jack before it's Frontier Day. I keep calling it Federation Day. It's not, it's Frontier Day, which we find out is in, did he say, I think they said about two and a half hours or something like that. We find a bit more out about Jack, that apparently it ain't just that disease. I can never remember what that disease is called that Picard had. We get a surprise at the beginning as well, and by the end there's some consequences. This episode is mainly an sit down and tell you everything, or at least almost everything. Like, it's the expedition dump, if you like, which is good because you need that. But it's not just them telling you stuff you already know, and it's them pushing the story forward. In terms of last week's episode, this one I'd give an 8 and a half out of 10. The big floaty gooey head, the thing that Vadic communicates with, it doesn't seem that that's a changeling. It somehow has control over Vadic. It kind of tortures her a bit, telling her that she's not as in control of her body as she thinks she is. And it's like, we allow you to do this and that. And it's kind of like, oh, who is this? And with the title called Dominion. Now, it's called Dominion because we find a lot out about Vadic and her motives. And it all stems back to the Dominion War. So I'm assuming that's why it's called the Dominion, as opposed to the big gooey head, possibly being a Jem'Hadar or something like on that lines. So we find out a bit more about what's going on with Jack. We find out a lot about Vadic, and it pushes the story forward. So with that, I'll get into the spoilers, because even though you would think it's just kind of a chit-chat episode, there wouldn't be much to spoil. There's a lot to spoil. When we find out Data, the mind of Data and Lore are competing with each other for dominance in the body. So with that, I will get into spoilers. So here we go. Spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the episode starts off with the Titan deactivated, basically. She's shut down, playing dead in a shipyard called the Chin Tuka shipyard. And Seven is talking to someone. We go in and Seven is talking to someone looking for help. And who is it? Well, it's none other than Tuvok. Yes, Tim Russ is back in this episode. He appears to be a captain now, but you can only see her. You can't see the rest of the crew. While Shaw and the Vulcan officer are on one side, LaForge and, I should say Geordi because his daughter's on the bridge, Geordi and Picard are on the other side. So Geordi is monitoring the link between Tuvok and the Titan, because it means they could trace where the Titan is, while Shaw and the Vulcan are looking at analysing the voice pattern to make sure it is Tuvok. And Seven brings up about the game that her and Tuvok used to play, thinking, or he's not going to be able to answer that I've beaten him. And he does. He's like, yeah, oh yes, the games, you've beaten me many times. To which she's like, yeah, I think it's him. Until she drops a hint of where to meet, and he's, yeah, I'll meet you there. And she calls him out and says, yeah, no Vulcan would go to this place. I can't remember what place it is. And stuff like that. And she catches him out and asks, where is Tuvok? And this changeling says, when we're done with him and yous will be begging for death. To which Picard then demands, they're doing two things. They're trying to find out where Riker is, and that's what Seven is contacting him over to see if they've heard anything about Riker being so-called arrested. And Picard demands to know where Riker is, and the changeling turns into like a dying Riker and calls him out. And Geordi has to cut the link because they're getting close to discovery. Then Geordi, Beverly and Picard have a conversation about how the hell they're going to figure out how to scan for the changelings, because they realise that Picard was going to give a speech at Frontier Day, and you have to get scanned. So his blood and everything, even though the changelings are pretty good, there's a certain thing that it won't work if it's not actually Picard, which they realise that's one of the reasons they took his body, and why they possibly want Jack to link the blood so it's more correct. And Beverly decides one of the only ways they really can try and discover stuff is basically you're going to weaponize something that would potentially cause genocide. To which Picard's like, well, let's get it done and we'll worry, or we'll kind of sit down and discuss what to do when the time comes. Then we go to Data, because they're trying to figure out what exactly they want with the body. That the body is going to have Picard's blood. Jack, they think, will have it, but there's something that'll be missing, and they know the one person who should know what that is, and it, of course, is Data. So Data, we find out, is competing with Lore. So Geordi says, look, here's the problem we're having with this. So he tells his daughter, the other daughter, not Sydney, his actual daughter in real life, to activate him, but only the voice, basically. And it's Data. And then it instantly turns into Lore, and Geordi's like, this is the problem. Lore's here. They're trying to figure out how could they separate the two, and Geordi can't even figure it out. He's like, this isn't even robotics, this is art. Then we go to Vadic talking with the big floaty head, and it's telling her time's running out and to get Jack. Then we go to Jack and Sydney in turbo lift, and this is where it gets weird. So Jack is kind of trying to hit on Sydney a bit, and the camera starts panning around, and all of a sudden we hear Sydney's voice saying, is he hitting on me? He is kind of charming and he is cute. All you'd have to do is touch my hand. And he looks down and touches her hand, and she walks out of the turbo lift and turns back and asks him, why did you do that? And you're like, thinking, are we just meant to be hearing her? Are we hearing her through him? Is he hearing her thoughts? But his eyes turn red and he sees kind of the black vein things coming up in the corridors behind her. And he says nothing, the door's shut. So he goes to Picard and wants to give himself in, says, this is all because of me. Just give me up. And Picard comes up with a plan and says, I think I know how we can get Vadic. So then we get the Shrike showing up to a new junkyard. I'm not sure what this junkyard's called. It does tell you. Oh, what did it say? It just said outer space Delta Quadrant. Was it Delta Quadrant or Alpha Quadrant? I think it said Delta. Where the Titan looks like it was in a fight with another ship. So Vadic goes with an away team onto the Titan to catch Jack. They go running around. She won't tell him why they want him. She said it'd be easier to show him. So they capture her through a force field. Beverly's questioning her. Then Picard comes in there questioning her. Well, Jack and Sydney are stuck in a corridor with 3 force fields on each side and a changeling on each side. And they want Geordi to beam them out. But all of a sudden, Geordi's locked out from the transporters and the door where Data is closes and Lore took full control. And he's now starting to take control of the ship. And this is when we get to find out a hell of a lot about Vadic. So when they're questioning her, she keeps whistling what sounds like 3 blind mice, but every now and again it seems to change. And we find out that she's a product of the Dominion War, that Starfleet apparently took a few of the changelings. Now, it doesn't quite explain, because I thought she was saying this was when they were trying to come up with that virus that would have wiped out the changelings. And Picard does come up and say to her, like, we came up with the cure. And she says, yeah, but Starfleet refused to give it to us. One of our own kind had to steal it, because Odo stole it and took it to them. It appears that now it could be Section 31. They don't say. We just see a scientist working on changelings, like little pieces of changelings, basically torturing them, trying to perfect the morphing capabilities and stuff. And that scientist is what Vadic looks like. She took her image. And Picard says she did that to remind herself of her own hate. And she says, you basically made us the best weapons that you could send us into any place as spies and be undetected. And she says, she's basically saying, you took my family, so I'm going to take yours. And then we get a great scene with Geordi. Something we probably should have got more so than with Picard through season 1 and 2. We finally get Geordi breaking down for Data. So it's Lore behind the door, but Geordi is pleading with Data and telling him he made him a better man, a better father, a better friend, and told him flat out, like, when you died it broke me. And Lore, it almost works, but Lore every now and again kind of takes back control and says, oh, the power of your friendship's very strong, but this isn't gonna work. Data's gone. But Geordi keeps pushing for control. But Lore takes full control for a minute of the ship, and he says, the enemy of the friends of my enemy are whatever. and he lowers all the force fields. So Vadic gets away. Picard and Beverly try and shoot her, and they're going to execute her anyway. They were like, yeah, she's not giving the stuff up. She also explains to them that she's not the one who wants Jack. It's someone else that wants Jack. And Picard says, like, you know, have we gone too far that our moral compass is no longer there? So they basically realise that Vadic is basically an executioner, that they invited death onto the ship. So they go to shoot her. She gets away. The force fields come down with Jack and Sydney. And Jack kills one of the changelings, but Lore raises a force field separating him and Sydney. So Geordi is still pleading with Data to take full control. Jack's eyes go red because one of the big, huge changeling brings Sydney back and slams her against the force field. Jack's eyes turn red, like we've seen him do, but then Sydney's turns red. They can hear each other, and Jack starts fighting like he's in control of Sydney's body. So every move he's making, she's making, and takes down this changeling. Where Data finally takes control, then brings down the force fields. And then Sydney and Ting have to go running because Vadic's coming up after them. Beverly and oh yeah, that's the thing. The experiment that was being done in Daystrom Center on Vadic and some other changelings was a project called the Protos project. And Beverly then discovers that there's some sort of, it's like aluminum or something, traces of that in. So they figured out how they can track them. So they find out Vadic and her, I'm going to assume it's her second in command, the big huge thing, are on deck 9. Shaw goes down with 2 security officers together. They killed the 2 security officers, capture him, and manage to take the ship hostage. They get onto the bridge and take it hostage, and then tells Jack it's time he finds out who and what he really is. And that's where the episode ends. So yeah, definitely an interesting episode, especially finding out more about Vadic, finding out other than seeing the changeling that was Tuvok turning into Riker. That's the only Riker that's in this episode. There's no Deanna in it, and there's no Raphael Worf in it. But it's like it really pushed the story forward, finding out more about Vadic, hearing about why these changelings seem to be doing what they're doing, and the fact that they're not fully in control, that there's somebody or something else in control. And there's a few hours from the point we are in this show. There's meant to be a few hours before Frontier Day, for when all the ships of the fleet will be in the one place. So yeah, I'll give it an 8.5 out of 10. Definitely brought the story forward and gave us a lot of more information, particularly about Data as well. So we could figure out, like, are we supposed to call him Data, or are we supposed to call him Lore? It is Data. Oh, and I forgot to say, when Geordi was showing Picard that the problem every time they turn him on is that Lore comes through, Data asks for Picard's help, and Picard says that's enough, they shut him down. And he's like, this is hard, that many years ago. So they're trying to stress that it was years ago since the first season. Says Data asked me to help him die, and now he's asking me to help him again. And Geordi flat out says, like, well, we got to figure out how to get Data out and get rid of Lore, because he can't go through the pain of losing his best friend again. So, yeah, we get great moments with Geordi and Data, and something that we should have got. Because they were the friends, not Picard and Data. That's the weird thing, particularly with season 1 and 2. It was all Picard and Data, when it should have been LaForge. But anyway, that's episode 7, called Dominion. So, until next week, I'll leave it there for this one. So cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.